What?
What happened? All disappeared.
Yeah, everyone's coming in. Everyone's coming in. Just give me a couple of minutes. As they come in, everyone's being joined in. I'm just admitting all. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. As you join us, I'm just admitting everyone in. Just bear me 10 seconds or so. Everyone's joining in. 3 people waiting. Admit all. Okay, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to the Islamic courses session on Coronos and Islamic Environmentalism. We're honored and privileged to have 3 amazing and esteemed guests from the Muslim world who are experts in the field. We have Fazlun Khalid, we have Professor Mawil Dien, and Professor Fachruddin from Indonesia. And as you know, we know the situation of the Coronos around the world, but we're also linking it to the whole environmental issue, how such a microbe can bring the whole world to its knees, to humanity and society. And we're going to ask a lot of thought-provoking questions and reflections. And can Muslims bring something onto the table for humanity also? So the format of the session will be, we're going to have 10 minutes from each esteemed guest, Professor Dien and Professor Mawil and Fazlun. And after that, after the 10 minutes are done, each person will take questions and answers from the participants. We would prefer everyone, if you don't mind, everyone has been muted. Everyone has been muted, more or less. Those who are not muted, please mute your mics. Okay, this is being recorded, so it will be available for people who didn't get to see all of it. But we prefer a live session at the end of the day. Okay. So what's going to happen? We're going to start off with Sidi Fazlun first, and then we're going to have Professor Mawil Dien, and then we're going to have Professor Fachruddin. 10 minutes each person, and thereafter that we're going to have Q&A from the participants live in this session. Can I just remind everyone, please, can you please keep your mics on mute, unless you're going to ask a question during the Q&A session. You can have your video showing if you want. It's completely up to you. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, Sidi Fazlun Khalid, who is the director of IFEES, Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences. Sidi Fazlun Khalid is also the advisor to the United Nations on Environmental Faith, is a member of the Governing Council of the UN Environmental Programme, and not only has been the founder of the IFEES, he's been recognized as one of the 15 leading eco-theologians in the world, in the top 100 environmentalists and 500 most 500 influential Muslims globally. He's worked with WWF and various declarations, written numerous articles, books, and journals over the course of 30 years or so. IFEES, if you go to IFEES's website, you can see more about them. They've been pioneering in the work of environmentalism for the last 30 years or so. So without further ado, Sidi Fazlun. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It's good to be on this project, Mizan. Thank you for inviting us to this panel. First of its kind, hopefully. And good to touch base with all colleagues again, Professor Mawil and Professor Fachruddin in Indonesia. One of the initial thoughts that I had when the whole corona thing appeared on the horizon was a reflection on this verse in the Quran, Surah Rum 41, Zahar al-Fasad fil barri wal bahri bima kasbat aydin nas. This by now should any Muslim involved in the environmental business should by now be familiar with this verse, which refers to or reminds all of us that corruption is caused by us. And if we learn from the lessons caused by this corruption, we can in fact go back to the beginning, to the kind of fitra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us. And this word fitra, the natural paradigm, is what we have in fact left behind, and we are on another trajectory altogether. And perhaps it's also a reminder that we are also all in this lizard's hole and trying desperately to climb out of it. One of the things that emerged out of this whole business was a reminder from the United Nations Department of Economy and Social Sciences that the replaying of the global shutdown that occurred during the banking crisis in 2000 and 2008 would be looming on the horizon. But do you know what? This has been gazumped by the corona business, and we are having an early warning of the kind of things that can happen to us if we do not learn the lessons of the previous decade. So, in fact, it has affected everything. It has affected our lifestyles, the way we behave with our family, with our neighbors, with our community. There's an economic shutdown and a total rethink of how we are going to run the world. So, where are we? The wildlife is coming back. Fish are returning to the canals of Venice and the rivers of India and all the rivers in the world. People are now beginning to drink water from sources that they thought were polluted. We are also beginning to discover that there's a massive reduction in carbon emissions. There's also been city centers like Beijing and Delhi, New York are beginning to experience pure air for a change, and it hasn't happened for a long time. So we are in fact learning lessons that have been forced on us because of the kind of way that we have been behaving recently. But I like to leave you and make more room for question and answer session. I'd like to leave you with a couple of questions, and the background of the question is this. Our consumer patterns have led to researchers coming to the conclusion that it is going to take over 18 months to recover from our economic and consumer activities that has taken 12 months. So that is a huge gap. That is a huge resource gap. We have been mounting a massive assault on the natural world to the extent that we are now over-consuming. Now, if you consider the fact that much of this overconsumption comes from the developed or overdeveloped countries, I would like you to think about what we mean by prosperity, because even the European Union, who have just published their new Green Deal, or Green Deal as they call it, are now saying they are promising prosperity in a milieu that will take care of climate change. I want to ask you the question: is it possible? Is it possible, given our consumer rates, to continue the kind of prosperity that we have defined for us? Is that possible? That's the main question that we have to ask ourselves. And the second question is, the basis of our economic activity is based on the growth agenda. Now, as I said to you earlier on, we are over-consuming. We need 18 months to recover our consumption patterns of 12 months. Now, post-COVID, post-corona, there's going to be, all the political leaders are promising that there would be a growth agenda. So we are going to go back to normal in a sense. So we're not going to learn the lessons. So where in your mind's eye does this whole thing about growth agenda, given the finite resources of the planet, going to figure? How high on the agenda is this going to figure? There are the two major questions I'm asking you to think about, and think of this in terms of a finite planet. And that's all I have to say for now. Let's sort of make room for my colleagues on the panel to do their bit, and then we'll come back later and have a conversation about this, inshallah. Thank you, Mizan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sidi Fazlun. We've got nearly 40 people coming up, 50 people. We've got people from around the world who've just joined us, from America all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Turkey, and all over Europe as well. So it's a real global audience, mashallah. And thank you so much for those who've just joined us. Apologies, there was a bit of a technical delay right at the start, but we've just had Sidi Fazlun Khalid, who's just delivered his presentation. Each presenter will have around 10 minutes to deliberate, and then after that we'll have an open Q&A discussion with regards to relating it to environmentalism, Islamic environmentalism. We know about Coronos, but we want to relate it to the situation with regards to Islamic environmentalism. So, right, just a quick brief for those who just come in. We are asking everyone to please put your mics on mute. It is being recorded, so don't worry. Once it's recorded, and I will be putting it up on YouTube, so you folks can have, if you missed the first session or didn't get a chance later on, you'll have a chance to look at it in your own time. And still encourage people to join in, because it's a very unique subject with an amazing lineup. We have three of the world's leading panelists on Islamic environmentalism. We have to take advantage of this. Now, moving on to the next speaker. Can I just remind everyone, please pick your mic. I know there's some folks who haven't put it on mute. We really need you to put it on mute so there's no background noises. So if you want to show your faces, that's absolutely fine. Completely up to you. We will be taking questions at the after each presentation is finished. In the meantime, you can put your questions on the chat, and we'll try and answer as many of them as possible, because presenters will have questions. Now, moving on to the next speaker, we're honored to have Professor Mawil. Originally, you're from Iraq. He's Emeritus Professor of Islamic Studies at the University of Wales, and recently teaching and leading the Islamic Studies Department at the Qatar University. You've been researching for the last 30 years. Research has been focusing on Islamic law and ethics and environment, and written numerous publications on Islam and environment and various related areas, and delivered many conferences over the last 30 years. So we're really honored and privileged to have Professor Mawil. It's great to see you. It's lovely to see you. That you're connected from the beautiful area of Wales, unlike me in London, lockdown. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Professor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm delighted to meet all of you, really, and particularly I can see among my audience Fazlun Khalid, Professor Fachruddin, Professor Salman. I'm delighted to speak to a very learned audience. I probably will start from where Fazlun started regarding the consumerism. And I think this is one of the things that we really, over the last many years, I have, as the brother Mizan said, I have been researching this area very thoroughly. And I just finished examining a PhD students in SAWAS on a subject which is relevant to the environment, which is economics. I actually grew to believe that really the environmental crisis in the world is triggered quite often, in fact, most often, by economic crisis, which leads to political crisis. And the one who suffers normally is the environment. And the COVID-19 that we are witnessing today is, in the word of Inger Anderson, the United Nations environmental chief, is the environment is sending us a message. It's telling us that there is a huge imbalance taking place in the world, and there's a lot of pressure being placed on the environment that by and large, is caused by human being. And both the global heating and the destruction of the natural world for farming, mining, and housing have to end, as both wildlife and the entire globe is suffering from this fundamental problem of human destruction. And I would like, just within this very short time, just to sort of unpack the idea of human destruction to the environment. And the conclusion that many people draw that from that, the cause of the environmental destruction quite often is related to population growth. And the fact that we as a human being are destroying the environment in so many ways and in so many patterns. And there are already some prediction, sad as it is may be, that the close down of the world, more or less, has contributed to some of the healing process for the environment. And we don't want to go into details about how much of the ozone layer has been patched during the last few months because of the reduction of the airplanes, pollution, factories, and human being pollution. We don't want to go into that in detail because until now, we are not very certain about it. But what I would like to say is that our perspective as Muslim scholars, learners, is that right from the beginning, if the instruction of Islam is being adhered to, then there will be a huge achievement that will take place, and the environment wouldn't have had to suffer in this way, in this pattern. And one of the warnings that some of the environmental experts, Cunningham, was saying in reflection on Anderson's statement in an article that has been published in The Guardian very recently, is human being consumption of some kind of mammals, which is basically common in China, cause this species barrier to be destroyed. And the species barrier destruction between human being and the other creatures is one of the problems that is causing our environment to be even worse. I mean, that problem of the COVID-19 really is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot of possibilities in the future. Like, for instance, Cunningham said other diseases from wildlife has had much higher fatality rates in people, such as 50% for Ebola, 60% to 75% for Nipah virus, transmitted from bats in South Asia. Although you might not think it at the moment, we probably got a bit lucky with the COVID-19. So really, with the COVID-19, we are lucky, but there could be more coming unless human being and the world take place. And when I said unpacking, I want to just to look how Islam treated the other creatures and the concept of tahara and purity that concentrated Islam has encouraged people right from the beginning to follow. And why there is haram, some kind of haram food to eat, why the bats are considered as some species which are not to be eaten. Why did the Prophet ﷺ give certain categories which we are not allowed to eat? The categories that the Prophet has mentioned, كل ذي ناب من الطير وكل ذي لحم كل ذي ناب من السباع وكل ذي ظفر من الطير. These are every bird which has a claws and every animal which has a canine. These are basically prescribed by the Prophet ﷺ in order to avoid the jump into the barrier of the species. If human beings adhere to these instructions, people think it is rudimentary, but these instructions really came from the Prophet ﷺ. And Allah said about him, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He doesn't speak out of his own gist, but it is inspired by Allah. Allah knows that there are species which can cause destruction if we consume them. I mean, this is a flavor of what we can grapple with in the future. I mean, the COVID-19, I'm sure that, and I hope that it's going to be sooner or later to be taken care of. But obviously, we can see the economical problem that it has caused, and it is only a minute part of the problem. The problem is going to be of a huge gravitas unless we understand really what is going to happen. The economic of a human being is going to be threatened, to say the least, unless we really, as a human being, try to find some kind of formula. And I maintain that this formula exists in the Islamic instruction, in the instruction, whether it is economical instruction, ethical instruction, or indeed ritual instruction. And if you look at the ritual instruction of Islam, and if you look at the diet of Islam, and all the instructions of Islam, you'll see that it represents a kind of protective recipe for humanity, not only to protect human being, but also to establish a relationship between human being and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way whereby human being become abd lillah and not a divine, a God himself instead of Allah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I hope I covered 10 minutes. Brother Fazlun.
Thank you so much, Professor. Just to remind again, we have folks from as far as America all the way to the Philippines, I can see, as well as the US and Turkey and Iraq. We have quite a few folks from the Middle East, it seems, Qatar. Right, okay, so moving on to just a reminder for those who have just joined in, we've just had two of our panelists, alhamdulillah, Sidi Fazlun Khalid and Professor Mawil, who we will be, if you've missed, don't worry, it is being recorded, so you'll have a chance to see their presentations again later on. What we're doing, we're giving 10 minutes to each presenter to deliberate, and then we're going to have Q&A open house from everyone, and we're asking everyone to write down their questions on the chat, and then when we do the Q&A session, you'll have a chance to either speak on the Zoom directly, or show your face, or on the chat, whichever way we're showing some fixing. Moving on to the next speaker, Professor Fachruddin. Okay, can I just remind everyone, please, can you mute your session, your Zoom, so there's no background noise or noise from everyone. I'm going to introduce you to Professor Fachruddin, who's originally from Indonesia. He's going to be speaking from his perspective, what's happening in Indonesia, but at the same time, a little bit about the pesantrens and the work he's been doing. He is an environmentalist, an expert, an author, a senior lecturer at the graduate program, Universitas Nasional, chairman for the Center of Islamic Studies there as well. He's also been involved with Sidi Fazlun Khalid and our other panelists in the Declaration for Global Climate Change in Istanbul in 2015. And he's been part of many boards and authored many books and chapters on nature, conservation in Islam. And also, we're asking also to talk about the pesantrens and eco Darul Ulums. What are they? What's so unique about the region? And obviously, Indonesia has been at the forefront of these issues, taking sometimes us folks in the West or other parts of the world, we don't really live next to the rainforest or whatever environmental environment we are, and we don't appreciate what we have. But some of the folks in Indonesia seem to be taking the lead. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Professor Fachruddin. Bismillah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Mizan. Our respected panelists, Professor Mawil Izzi, as well my respected guru Fazlun Khalid, and all the Muslimin, and Muslimat all over the world. Thank you for this opportunity for meeting you together to this kind of platform. Um, I I would like to just underline the practicalities that two scholars have been talking about regarding Indonesia on the consumption and also the second aspect is on the wildlife. I was born in Borneo, where I was born in the teenagers. I can see where the orangutans are just getting close to human because they are so tame, and because I was born in the Muslim communities, and I was understood at the time Muslim at the several area was not allowed to consume that kind of animal. Primate has been stated on the pig. As Professor Mawil Dien said that Muslim are not allowed to eat everything. They are only allowed to eat the halal and tayyiban. This is practically have very benefited for the conservation, and so that's why we can see up to now the primates still there, the orangutan still there, all the primates because they are not being hunted by the Muslim at in particularly in Borneo and in Sumatra and the edge of tropical rainforest where Muslim live. So this kind of teaching started at 17th centuries, where Islamic scholar Syekh Muhammad Arshad al-Banjari wrote. He is a jurist. He studies in Saudi Arabia, but make a great books on fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, and wrote a special chapter on the bab, the chapter of food in his fiqh, on the Babul At'imah, which is mentioned all kind of animal that right now is being protected are not allowed consumed by the Muslim. So this kind of is very surprised after 300, 400 years. This is affected the Islam and the life of that animal, the Islamic life of the animal. That is why very important to understand that Islam bring so far the legacy, which is very good for the Muslim communities, and in practicalities for the Islamic ethics on resources and the protection of the animal. First, that's the chapter. The secondly, I would like to mention that in according to putting this our modern world have been 300, 400 years disseminations of the Islamic teaching, and we seen there are a gap. We seen there are a gap of understanding of Islamic teaching with the ground level knowledge of the Muslim communities. That is why at the recent time we asking the Islamic studies of Universitas Nasional together with NGOs and also the government of Indonesia asking the Islamic Council of Ulama to answer a fatwa regarding the protection of the animal for the protection for the balance of the ecosystem. This kind of fatwa is really needs, and we been disseminated this fatwa to all over Indonesia, regardless many clerics that also together with the Majlis Ulama Indonesia, the Islamic Studies emphasizing this kind of importance of this teaching, because it's related to the wisdom, as well the Islamic legacy with the jurisprudence, and in order to updating the knowledge that have been gapped for 100 years, that Islam have their own very good, very strong teaching on Islamic balance, on how we avoid and how we avoid not to waste or to extravagance of that natural resources. Up to now, Islamic studies of Universitas Nasional have been trained hundreds, I could say thousands of clerics in the grassroots level, to make them understand about the fatwa, as well about the environment. So this is including, of course, the pesantren, which is pesantren. We have about 20,000 pesantren with about 4 million students in Indonesia. We're trying to be systematically involving them, because they are very young cadre in the future. And with this, we hope that the Islamic environmentalism, which is quite new for them, can be more harnessed in the community and the Islamic world in the future, inshallah. Thank you for the maintain. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.
Thank you so much, Professor. Just to remind everyone who are just joining us, we've just had all three panelists deliberate on their thoughts and reflections on the Coronos and Islamic environmentalism. Those who've just joined us, don't worry, we are recording it, so you'll have a chance to see the recording in your own time. Once we put it online, it'll be on YouTube, and you can see the presentations later on. We're going to open up for questions and answers. And just before we do that, if you don't mind, if everyone can put their questions on the chat. I know there's a lot of questions. There's over nearly 50, 60 people now. We've got folks from all the way from America, all the way to the Philippines, a lot of folks from Indonesia, Malaysia, a lot of people from the Middle East, particularly from Iraq, and
people from Qatar.
From Qatar as well. From Qatar as well. So it's
Dr. Fatima Zahra is there.
Fatima Zahra, mashallah. So great. That's awesome. So I'm gonna start with myself. So just to start, and it could be any, maybe Fachruddin, because obviously time zone, because you're quite far, quite ahead of us, and it's getting late. So can you tell us what is Indonesia? What are the Indonesia ulama? What are you doing in the pesantrens? So pesantrens are the Islamic schools. So what are the works you're doing in Indonesia with the pesantrens, in teaching environmentalism, eco-theology? Is such a thing exists? Number one, and what are the practical manifestations? Because when we think of Darul Ulums, when we think of Islamic schools, when we think of scholars, I remember 20 years back, and some scholars used to say, this is animal worshipping. Why are you talking about the environment and learning about the rights of animals and the environment? This is what, arty-farty green, people do. This is not relevant to us. This is something the white people do. It's their problem, and things like that. So is there something, Bismillah. So I'll hand it over to yourself. And then we'll get some reflections from the other. And then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mizan. My engagement with the pesantren Islamic school, I aware that Islamic school is potentially, because they have the teacher there and the modalities of the education that we can engage with them, because they are the future of the ummah, and they are mostly in pesantren particularly, they are boarding. So at the first time we was in 2003, we conducted a consultation with 33 leaders of pesantren, And at the time, we asked them to digging the Islamic teaching regarding the environment. And that pesantren are coming, the Islamic leader, the pesantren leaders are coming from all over the countries. We have also from, not only from Java, but also from Sulawesi and as well from Sumatra, where we recognize that they are also strong in teaching of certain of Islamic disciplines, such as Quranic tafsir, the Islamic fiqh, also from the hadith. So from that three kind of aspects, also by digging the contemporary ulama's opinion regarding Islamic teaching to the environment, we then find a new kind of information regarding Islam and environment. That is why it is the book we call the Menggagas Fikih Lingkungan, which is the taking the initiative for the environmental fiqh or fiqhul bi'ah. So from the start of that kind of dialogues, and we produce a document on that, we spread that ideas and that document to many pesantren all over the countries. And at the times, we also find some pilot models, such as you mentioned about the pesantren of Darul Ulum in Bogor, in Lido, because this pesantren are close by with the Gunung Gede National Park, so the santris, the student can also enjoy the national park by visiting the national park, and then they also
and also the fact I read, sorry, Professor, I read that through these Islamic conservation principles, they've actually led to a net benefit in the replenishment of the forests. The animals are coming back. So we know from by creating Hima zone, using these Islamic principles of conservation, they've actually led to the resurgence of the natural order in those areas where the Darulums were working. So we're seeing Islam in practice, not just talk in the textbooks. Is that correct?
Yes, this is a pilot instrument. That pesantren is not quite big, but we seen a creek going through the way at the backyard of the pesantren, and they are now prohibited that zone. We call it Harim zone, because theoretically, if we call Hima, it should be more larger than that. The Harim zone is protected for practicalities, for the prohibition for water bank. So that kind of practice is still there now, and the pesantren are committed to protect that. Instead of they protect that small forest, they have a river bank, and they are harvesting the water from that, the clean water. And by accident, after they protecting that forest, the water come like artitesis. They coming just jump from the ground, so it's very easy to tackle. And
so it's a very good sustainable model of development, or to some extent. Yeah. So we've got some questions.
They are harvesting from that water for drink for the students.
Right.
And also they create that Harim zone for practicing the biology, studying insects, studying birds, squirrel, and every wildlife animal.
Fantastic, and that's really interesting like how the pesantrens, the eco pesantrens, are working. And maybe another session we could do on those particular sessions. But moving on, we've got quite a few questions relating to someone saying, I'm comfortable with stressing the environmental benefits of COVID when the price is being paid by the poor and most vulnerable. Those who have caused the environmental crisis, economic, political elites, are not the ones who are paying the price. That's one question. Another one, an interesting, relating to growth. We need to define development as understood in the capitalist model and ask the question, development at what cost? Would you agree that the new poles need to be defined? The conventional left and right is no longer valid. We may need to identify new poles as builders and destroyers. So there's some interesting questions related to growth. Another one, I think we need to stop the issue of stopping utilization of haram animals for the sake of the environment. Since bad utilization makes people eat animals live or eating the animal, which will create a dangerous protein in human beings and so on. So if we don't mind, Sidi Fazlun or Professor Mawil, whoever wants to go first. Sidi Fazlun, would you like to comment on some of these questions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, may I say that these questions on growth and developments and all the other issues relating to the the economics of environmental protection, I deal with this in my book, which was published last year. It's called Signs of the Earth, Islam, Modernity and the Climate Crisis. It can be had through Amazon. I deal with the political economy, and I do a kind of an integrated analysis of Islam, the political and the political economy, and where we go from there. And I do ask questions about the current political model, which is based on economic growth, which is untenable. Can I, for a moment, just go back to the question that you highlighted, Mizan, and which constantly asked, and which was also answered by my colleague, Professor Fachruddin. The question that comes up time and time again: what is Islamic environmentalism? Is the Quran environmental? I would like to say at the outset, and this might shock you, there is no such thing as Islamic environmentalism. That is Islam. And you get your Islam from the Quran and the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I would say this quite simply. It is very simple. That if you follow the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you are an environmentalist, Islam or otherwise. So that in a sense, we are using current jargonistic terms because we are in this current modern world, which has invented all these theories and ideas and the jargon as well. We tend to speak in, that's the language that's our currency. The current language is our currency. So what I'm saying to you is that Islamic environmentalism, if you follow the Sunnah of Rasul, then you are an environment. As simple as that. So how can I then put the meat on the bones of this position? It is also said that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the Quran walking. So how does he then interpret a verse like La yuhibbul musrifin? Allah does not love the wasters. Now let's translate that into his amal, his practice. Take a event where the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was watching one of his Sahaba doing wudu and wasting the water. And he said to this, I've forgotten the name of the Sahaba, but here it is. And he said to this Sahaba, do not waste water. And the Sahaba retorted, even when I'm doing wudu, Rasulullah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, even when you are by a flowing river, you do not waste water. That is a fundamental lesson that we should all learn, quite basic, you see. And I think that these are the occasions in the Quran. For me, the Quran is inherently environmental. You see, it says, La yuhibbul musrifin. It also says, we are muhit. Allah is muhit. Allah encompasses. Allah also says in Quran, La khalaqus samawati wal ard akbar min khalqin nas. Allah's creation is bigger than you. You see, we are just a minute, if you like, a microbe. And His creation, everything He created is bigger. So it is in a sense to get our sense of belonging where we are, you see. And modernity
that's an ethical code of practice following the Sunnah,
yes.
right? So the question is about development. We have 1.6 billion Muslims, right? What we're going to do here, because at the end of the day, development, at the end of the day, will have to feed them. There's going to be some negative externalities. People will say we have to exploit the earth. You know, God says to exploit the earth, right?
Yeah, but whether we like it or not, Mizan, we are in the lizard's hole. Well, and the lizard's hole I would define as what we call modernity. We are all in a globalized, economized. We function with the political economy, regardless of the nature of the governance of our countries. We are all part of a globalized world, just stuck to the financial and economic structures that are devised for us by the globalized system. So we are part of it. And as part of it, we are in the proverbial lizard's hole. We are trying to climb out of it, you see. And what we have a lot of is a lot of ibadat, but not enough mu'amalat. And we need to move out of that. If we are attempting to get out of this lizard's hole, we need to begin to practice the mu'amalat of Islam as well. And that's another subject altogether. And we need to learn about that. And this is why in the book, I try to analyze what we mean by prosperity, what we mean by growth, what we mean by development. And I've devised a very simple equation. P plus D equals P plus D. Progress plus development equals pollution plus destruction. So what I'm really saying to here, now we cannot move from where we are to this other position that I'm saying. It has to be gradual. Otherwise, if you want to have a total global Armageddon, we have to be gradual about this, to understand what is really going on. If you do not understand what is really going on, you cannot, in fact, produce the solutions. So what I'm really saying to you is that we are not in what I would call an Islamic zone. We are in modernity. You see, now as Muslims, you know, who are Ramadan is coming. You know, it is a very sacred month where we can begin to reflect on the environmental dimensions of Islam in this month, and think about the consumerism that we indulge in. You see, so there is a lot to think about and begin to act as well. So I would suggest, going back to my original statement a few minutes ago, is that begin to practice the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And in order to help that process, we have now, Fachruddin has already spoken about fiqh al-biya. The fiqh al-biya is something quite important. The Indonesian scholars who I've been working with as Fachruddin will affirm, since the post-tsunami period, they are, in my view, the Indonesian scholars are the most advanced amongst the scholarly community to look at what the environmental dimensions of Islam are. So fiqh al-biya, which incorporates the principles of the hima system and the harem system, which we need to get familiar with, as an urgent measure. And we ourselves in the foundation have also begun to look at what we call ilm al-khalq. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Quran about ilm al-khalq, knowledge of creation? There is no fiqh on this. You see, so we invite scholars to look at ilm al-khalq. And in order to get people to think about this, and Mizan, we know you've been involved in promoting our training programs. And ilm al-khalq, for starters, we based it on 4 principles, which is Tawheed, which we call the unity principle, Mizan, which we call balance principle, Fitra, which we call the primordiality of creation, and Khalifa, the principle of responsibility. So the material is already there, you see, that can be used. And, we can stop talking and start practicing, if you like.
Siddiq, I'll have to come back to you. I'm going to bring in Professor Mawil, and we're going to continue our discussion.
Yeah.
Professor Mawil, Bismillah. Yeah. What are your thoughts and reflections on some of the questions that have been posed on development? And then you've also talked about, obviously, the issues of these, the binary narrative. Stop blaming the other fascist destroyers. Doesn't help. What we need is an inclusive model of sustainable development of society with environmental benefit is social, economic, and spiritual, but also some other interesting ones. Someone saying, I'm guessing environmentalism as being discussed is a bit unclear. Practicing will be the same. We're not talking a monolithic blanket term when we speak about environmentalism. There's a plethora of questions you can see from the chat. So what are your thoughts and reflections on some of the things? Bismillah.
Bismillah. As I said before, really, there is a very strong bondage between the environment, its conservation, and economics. And the statement that Fazlun mentioned about how there is only Islam, there is no environmentalism. I mean, I couldn't agree even more really on that. And the same thing applies to economics. There is no, I just published a paper maintaining that there is no Islamic economics. And that was like a bombshell, really. There is only Islam. And one of the main problems that we have is that we are trying to let Islam into modern economics. And modern economics was created at a time when there was colonialism and the mercantile views that were looking for ways of developing mechanisms in order to benefit from the outcome of their dealing with the third world, if you like, with the how did they have robbed from the poor countries their wealths and created capitalism. And then the idea of modern economics started emerging by the Keynesian theories, by the mercantile theories, and so on and so forth. So really, when we talk about economics, we should talk about Islam. And when we talk about environment, we should talk about Islam. And the fact is that we are now witnessing a time bomb, really. In the statement of so many scholars like Andrew Cunningham I just mentioned, we are witnessing a time bomb. And one of the aspects of this time bomb is what I mentioned earlier, is the eating exotic mammals. And if we look into Islam, why it has prohibited all of that, we can come with lots of conclusions. But the point is that I'm trying to also add here that when we see the environment is slipping off our hands, it is not slipping off our own hands. It's not our own property. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never said that this earth belongs to you only. هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا. لكم, all you, when you look at it carefully, you will see that it is a reference to all what Allah has created, whether a human being or animal or other forms of life on earth. And when we come and think that we are the masters, well, now we can see it with our own eyes that we are not the masters. And directing the economics towards the benefit of ourselves only, by creating ourselves, by making ourselves like lords of the universe. Allah is giving us an example. He's telling us, can you not see what will happen to you if you don't do that? ولا يزال الذين كفروا تصيبهم قارعة بما فعلوا أو تحل قريبا من دارهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in Surah Al-Ra'd, those who are infidels suffers and see what is happening around them. They should learn from that.
Sure, but Professor, people might respond saying, we're not living 100 years ago. This is post-modernity now. We have 2 billion Muslims to feed.
Right.
How are you going to have an organic farm chicken that's going to feed 1.5 billion Muslims? There's going to be some environmental destruction, right? There's going to be some consequences. There's going to be some externalities. It's all great talking about growth, and when we don't like growth, it's nice to have. We could have the model. We could have the development model of what we see in the Gulf. Lots of beautiful tall buildings, destroy the coral reefs. Don't worry, we can rebuild the coral reefs with, dump some aeroplanes and buildings in there. Somehow the animals will find their way or something like that. Why not? That seems like a great way of development, and we get our food. What's wrong with that? Human beings are the Khalifs, right? We'll find solutions. We have enough.
You see, the Khalif, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, when he mentioned, Inna aradna I mean, we have to look at the Quran and understand what the Quran is saying. The trust was given. Inna aradna al-amana. The amana was given to heavens and earth and the mountains. And they shunned from taking it, and a human being accepted it. Innahu kana zaluman jahula. He is a tyrant, ignorant. And this tyrant, ignorant human being who is controlling the world now is like so many leaders in the Muslim world who are ignorant and uneducated, and then leading their countries towards destruction. We as a human being need the qualified leaders, and that is Islam. And Islam now is in the bottom of the development curve. That's true. But I'm talking about the idea of Islamic theology, Islamic belief. And maybe Muslims in the form of Arabs or other forms are unsuccessful now to lead the ship. But you can see that Islam is coming in the hand of other people. Islam needs to be taken not only as by Muslims, it needs to be taken by non-Muslim as well, as a way of life. I mean, obviously Islam has to be practiced and believed and adhered to, but the principles of Islam are the right way forward. I mean, also, I actually would like to mention, what Professor Lovelock has said, that Earth takes care of its own, the Gaia theory.
Yeah.
And the Gaia theory, simply, James Lovelock is an English professor who said that whatever happens on Earth, it's going to be remedied by the Earth itself. Why? Because there are mechanisms in Earth whereby it's going to look after itself. Human being is nothing but a minute creature on this huge Earth and this huge universe.
Some scholars would take that. That's legitimacy for us. Okay, that's great. So we're just going to continue polluting, and then there'll come a point we'll just let the Earth regenerate. Business as usual. Why worry about it? God has created the Earth for us to take advantage of.
But the problem is, if we want to continue our existence on Earth and will not suffer the same fate like the dinosaurs, we need to find the way out of this predicament. We are going in the same directions like the dinosaurs are going. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not protect us if we do not protect ourselves. And it's very clear, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not alter what is happening in people until they change what is there in themselves. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ وَإِذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ سُوءًا فَلَا مَرَدَّ لَهُ. And if Allah wants for them destruction or su', nothing will stop it away from them. وَمَا لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ مِنْ وَالٍ. We need to read the Quran, and nothing for them, nothing will protect them except Him, Allah. وَمَا لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ مِنْ وَالٍ. هُوَ الَّذِي يُرِيكُمُ الْبَرْقَ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا وَيَنشُئُ السَّحَابَ الثِّقَالَ. It is He who shows you lightning and create in you hope and joy. All these cosmic phenomena, Allah is drawing our attention to it in order to understand that we are on this earth, not the masters. We are the trustees that Allah put us into it. And as long as we adhere to our responsibility as a trustees, we are like headmasters. If the headmaster think that this school belongs to him and he starts selling its assets and playing with this and that, it's going to collapse on his head. And that is what is happening to us. And that is why when I said that Andrew Cunningham is saying that it is a time bomb. And all scholars saying that this COVID-19, to come back to the issue, is just a warning shot. We really need to think about it and see what is happening. What is happening? We need Islam. We need Allah, to go back to Allah. وَمَا لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ مُوَالٍ.
Thank you so much. Sidi Fazlun or Professor Fachruddin, is there anything else you want to say, to add? Fazlun, I think I can see your...
Well, yeah, I mean, I would, again, I would like to draw people's attention to, I've given 10 possible pointers in my book where we could begin to recover an understanding of what Islamic environmentalism is all about. And I also have to say, to give credit where credit is due, Professor Mawil has also written a book on the environmental dimensions of Islam, and also Fachruddin is also a prolific writer in Indonesian.
I mean, one question that comes up quite often is the environmental agenda another colonial exploitation of the Muslim world? You know, a lot of Muslim scholars will say, as I said at the beginning, 20 years ago, this is monkey business, right? They used to say, why should we develop a fiqh of, you know, following the monkeys and plants? You know, this is what, you know, hippies do.
Yeah, I don't go by conspiracy theories. I face reality as it is. I think both Mawil and Fachruddin has been quite real about this, and I concur 100% with what they're saying. I think we need to understand that we are living in a paradigm not of our making. It's been designed for us. And colonialism is history. You know, I think the important thing is to understand that. You know, we can attack it, we can criticize it, but to understand where we fit into this picture. But what I'm saying is, along with my colleagues on the panel, is that Islam provides a resolution to this situation. But it is difficult to get out of this. I keep saying the lizard's hole. There's the hadith about the lizard's hole. We are all in it. How do you climb out of it? Whether you talk about the political economy or growth or economics or development or progress or how do you define prosperity, we are still in the lizard's hole. So what I'm saying is there are some pointers that I give in my book. And I say, I say that 10 points: live moderate, simple lives. Do not hoard wealth for its own sake. Share your wealth with the poor. Caring for the environment is a sacred duty of Muslims. That was without even considering that there is such a thing as environmentalism in Islam, just by following the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And we need to understand the whole money system, you know, the whole banking system. It's entirely soaked in riba. Everything we do is riba soaked, notwithstanding the Islamic banks. There is the mu'amalat about the Islamic markets. How many people know about that? We need the scholars to talk about mu'amalat. We need to talk about mu'amalat as emphatically as they talk about ibadah. We need to shift the perspective of the scholars. It's almost wholly concerned with ibadah. The system is quite happy for us to pray 5 times a day and do Ramadan and go to Hajj, do all the ibadah. And you need to also remember that in colonial time, what the colonial powers did was to abolish everything that was Islamic and only permit Islamic family law. You see, that's how we lost the mu'amalat. We need to go back and understand that. So there is a way of Islamic transactions. There is a way of fair trade in the Islamic world. And there is also a way of how you treat the people who work for you. And the sunnah is you pay people's wages before the sweat dries on their brow. And we need to conduct our affairs by mutual consultation, which is surah, which is a very fundamental form of Islamic democracy. And we need to give precedence to the rule of law. Allah says justice applies to everybody, whether it be your closest parent, your brothers, sisters, or parents, and there has to be equity. What I'm really suggesting in a nutshell is that we need to introduce the idea of justice, equity in everything we do. And the current economic model is anything but that. It is, now we have 1% of the world's population hoarding about 80% of the world's wealth. You see, so it is not fair. So we have a lot to do, and we need to think. And as Mawil said, and if non-Muslims understand what really Islam is about, they will practice the Islam. They don't have to be Muslims, but they will practice the Islam. But we can't expect others to do it if we don't do it ourselves. So this is something for everybody who is listening in to say, well, where do I start? You start with yourself. We can ask all kinds of questions. The answers are there, but talk to yourselves, talk among yourselves. Say, where can you start? You start with yourself and start with the Sunnah of Rasul.
Sure. Can I just get Professor Mawil, you wanted to say something?
Well, I mean, I think Ustaz Fazlun and myself are on the same wavelength in regard that we have the understanding that when we see a non-Muslim, then we think of da'wah and conversion to Islam. This is fair enough. But there are so many non-Muslims who can be or who are practicing so many ideas that are beneficial to humanities. We should, I mean, if you want to convert them to Islam, then good enough for you. But leave them do their human aspect of goodness, and that will bring them probably closer to Islam. And also, I want to think about the banking. The banking system we are living at is really the most horrendous system, because it's ruled in such a way which is destroying the entire world. And this is not my own statement. Jefferson, the third president of the United States, and one of the founding fathers of the United States, 1801 to 1809, he was the president of the United States, said, banking is more dangerous than armies. And to lend people, and when the state lend money and borrow money from the banks, and the hope that it will be paid back by future generations, this is more destructive to the society than armies. And this is what is happening now. I mean, you have to see the equation of how the situation is developing in the entire world. Where all these billions which has been suddenly come out to give to the National Health Service, to give to that, these are borrowed money from the economical capitalist system to be paid by, in the future, by our own generation, by our children and grandchildren. And that is why the world is facing shrinking. It's not growing at the moment. We are at zero growth level. And in many super countries and large countries, now they are worried that their level is going below the zero. Why? Because they are lending the banks who are more dangerous than armies. That is what exactly Jefferson said. This is I actually published a paper only about 5 months ago about environmentalism and economics. And
so there's a connection between the banking system, environmentalism, sustainability.
Absolutely.
So we'll come back to that another time, because obviously it needs another session. So people, one of the takeaways from today's session is, yes, we have the Coronos virus, that's fine, but this is a consequence of the economic model we have today, the banking system, the way we finance, the way we structure our lives, the ethical modes of living as well. They're all connected. But I want. There's a question that I want to Fachruddin, which is quite important. It's about the who teaches environmental subjects in Indonesian universities. Good Muslims according to Islam or secular? How far is the gap between academic theologians and Darul Ulama? So what's the gap between the ulama and the academic the people who teach environmentalism and the ulama? in universities? Is there some sort of convergence or divergence also? And this is from an well-known educationist in Turkey. Thank you. Fachruddin.
Thank you. It is, frankly speaking, the environmental and Islam connected just maybe from starting from a few decades, which is generating from the many attention of the Islamic academy, and that then the influence of many scholars from abroad, people like Mawil, Dien, Fazlun Khalid, Seth Hossein Nasr, is putting the foundations of that kind of thinking. And we understand that over here we have many Islamic universities that then realize this is when they find that many of them was digging or exploring the classical Islam, but not answering the contemporary issues such as environmentalism and environmental problem that being faced by the Muslim world. So, well, I think similar as in many other Muslim countries, as you understand, perhaps last October, the Muslim world have been adopted a document that been written by us. It is entitled the effort of activation of Muslim of religious factor and cultural factor in in response to the environment and sustainable development goals. It just happened last years in Morocco. They adopted that technocratic document that adopted by 57 Islamic countries. So, and many of that lesson learned is coming from Indonesia. As we understand that environment is something new from but we also learning the theoretical from the West, and the answer of given our own Islamic teaching as Islam as rahmatan lil alamin, we should try to find the text, which is find also the context.
So a lot of your work is still taking from the West, you would say, or we still haven't developed theology yet as much.
Yes, it is. It is many of the theoretical, but the science is normal, and we call science it's depend on how we use it, and that's why it's something a principle like what Fazlun Khalid said about ilmul halq is a fundamental to be understood by the Muslim scholars. So by this conversation, as a kind of beginning of this Islamic dialogue, I might hope in the future someone like Fazlun Khalid and Mawil Izzuddin also giving some kind of a time together, sit together to discuss and maybe teaching for the Islamic scholars.
Yes, please, brother. Yeah, please, Professor Mawil. Do you think there's more ijtihad needs to be done on this? There needs to be more investment in developing an Islamic eco-theology? Sure. Because obviously the institutions, we have to admit, there is if I was to go to Azhar or Deoband or any of the religious, Nahdul Ulama, or any of their religious institutions, and to them, what is your eco-theology? What is it the Quran and Sunnah says? What is your books? If I was to go to the church, to the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church, they've devised an amazing eco-theology, and they have projects, they have very detailed things. What do we have as the Ummah? I mean, as I said, 20 years ago, we have scholars who used to think this is all monkey worshipping. How far have we come?
Well, I mean, I think we still are really in the rudimentary level. I mean, how many Islamic organizations which are environmental organizations, apart from Fazlun Khalid and one or two others in the world. There aren't many, and that's what I mean, the fact that there is only Islam and no environmentalism, valid as it is, does not negate the fact that we need to fill this gap in the Muslim Ummah's need. And we started, I mean, I started at the University of Wales as a head of Department of Islamic Studies at the University of Wales. I started a center of Islam environmentalism. But nobody was interested in it in the government level. The Muslim world are interested either in and I'm sorry to say that, either in building a mosque, which is a great thing. I mean, I'm not saying no. Building a mosque is a great thing. But you need to have inside the mosque some kind of unit which is relevant to different patterns of needs in the society, like economics and environment. And this hasn't taken off in the Muslim world. And I think there is a need for that. And one of the largest conferences I attended in Qatar was the one which was initiated by Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa's university, under the patronage of the system there. We spoke about the environment for about a week, and in the end, we didn't have. We were going to. I mean, Zayad Sardar was there.
Don't you think, Professor? Because it's not the top of the priority, and part of the problem is most of these countries are very poor. They have other priorities. Don't you think fundamentally, epistemologically, there's a problem with our Muslim philosophy at the moment that can't connect theology, philosophy, economics at the moment? The interlinkages are not there. People can't see that link. I mean, for example, you have in Pakistan, you have a very big Darul Uloom there, which is the champion of Islamic finance. But if you go to Karachi, it's a dump. Environmentally, it's absolutely catastrophe. It floods all the time. It's growing uncontrollably. But you have some of the leading ulama there who can't connect. What's going on? Why haven't they developed? Yeah.
Long time ago, back in the year 1987, I was in Saudi Arabia as a professor of Islamic studies, and the Wildlife Institute at that time started a fantastic initiative, and they started writing about the environment. And there was a lot of work done. I mean, I think we don't like the theological, if you like, the academic research to develop this area. It is the practitioners like Fazlun Khalid which are lacking, really. I mean, Fazlun Khalid now is acting as a practitioner, as a scholar by doing the two jobs. But there are people who need to be on the field. And both myself, and I can't say that the same thing about Fazlun, he's much younger than me. We are getting to the end of our thread, really. And there is a need for young people to take up the torch and continue the job of, if you like, making environmental da'wah. We don't have something like an environmental da'wah. And why this has happened? Because we are still behind, and the people who are leading the world are interested in capitalism, are interested in commercialism, are interested in consumerism, and so on and so forth. I'm sorry to be a little bit deep, but this is the fact.
So maybe one takeaway would be, some of the takeaways would be some of our young scholars who are coming from Darul Ulooms or Islamic universities to consider possibly going into developing eco-theology, Islamic eco-theology, which both Sidi Fazlun and Professor Mawil have, and Professor Fachruddin, who's just praying his Maghrib at the moment in Indonesia time. So are there any recommended books, Professor Mawil, before we go to Sidi Fazlun? because obviously you've written a lot over the last 30 years as a world expert. What other things would you suggest to people to read?
I mean, there are really, if you go to, you know, Sheikh Google, you'll find in a lot of reference. All what you need to write is Islam and environment. And there are, you know, American scholars, a scholar who has actually compiled a book on Islam and the environment. I mean, I don't know whether I have it here in my shelf. I mean, obviously, there's what Fazlun has written. There's my book, Environmental Dimensions of Islam, which is a little bit old now. And we have the Environmental Declaration for the Conservation of the Environment. I have written quite a lot of papers in journals, like the Journal of the Faculty of Islamic Education in Malaysia, and the faculty of the University of Zaid. I am still publishing and writing on that. And at the moment, I am writing something on economic and environment. And I think this is where we need to tap into. And I think we have obviously Sayyid Hussein Nasr, who has written on that. And the ulama themselves, they actually wrote quite comprehensive references on different sections of Islamic law. Like, for instance, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, he has a book which is entitled, you know, Islam and the Environment. And he had tried to actually, as Fazlun said just now, you know, to give the due to whom is deserved. He actually has looked into the work that we started long time ago at the University of King Abdulaziz in Saudi Arabia. And we started with WWF. We produced one of the earliest pamphlets on Islamic environmentalism. And he took that book and developed it further from different point of view. But my critique about what he has done, he's a great scholar. He's one of the best scholars probably today. But he's not environmentalist. He's not actually you know, aware of so many issues. It is the same problem that we have with economics. We either have economists, Muslim economists, or we have alim. We don't have somebody who combines the two, both environmental knowledge and Islamic legal theological system knowledge. And the merger between the two is essential. And that is what we need to do. I mean, Ahmed Didat, rahimahullah, he was very clever with regard to da'wah. He developed young people after him, and Zakir Naik came as one of the outcome of that. We, when Fazlun and myself will go, I wonder who's going to do it after us. And we need somebody who has those two parallel going together in order to achieve that. When I was in Qatar, I tried to, I applied for a research grant in order just to do that. And lots of people were involved in that. I think even Fazlun Khalid was, name was included.
You'll get lots of, you'll get lots of money for Islamic finance, but you won't get anything for the...
This is it. This is it. I mean, another similar project who flagged off economics got the fund, and we did it. So really, the problem is people until now in the Muslim world has not grasped the importance of this issue. They are still thinking that, oh, I'm not interested in smelling a flower while I have people dying. But it's not like that. It's not like that. It is actually all the economical crisis started by environmental crisis. And look what happened in the diversion of the river Euphrates and the diversion of the river Nile.
Well, you're originally from Iraq. You can see, you're originally from your family, the people of Iraq are living through it.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, I haven't been back to Iraq for a while. But I mean, look what happened to Iraq now, one of the richest countries in the world with all its resources. But because it's been mundane, destroyed by the political factions, now it's literally paralyzed, and it's behind the world so many years really. And River Euphrates, when the Ataturk Dam was built on the river, the level of water has come down by about 3.5 meters.
Was it called the Ataturk Dam?
Ataturk Dam.
The founder of Turkey or something?
Turkey, yes. I mean, for all my love to Turkey and to what they are doing, but that was long time ago. That was done about 50 years ago, and it's still there. It created a lake bigger than the Red Sea, and it has sucked all the water from the river and created and killed all the fauna and the flora and there are villages completely which has been obliterated because of that. And this is being repeated again and again in the world. It's happening in Israel with the Palestinians. It's happening it's happened in Malaysia with the rainforest logging and destruction. I mean, things which people who are aware about the environment, like Fazlun, know about it, and quite often shout, but nobody listen. We need people to listen now. I am speaking about it with lots of jealousy and zealousy, really, because it is something which I can see it happening. And once this Zoom is over, I hope we will be in touch with the people here, so we can.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, everyone should be. If they're not on our mailing list.
Some kind of a group. I mean, now I don't know whom I'm just seeing faces, and people just see me, and probably they know my email izzideen@hotmail.com, and that is all. But what is there? We need this,
like a follow-up,
to be followed up and to develop into something tangible. Not just, we are not here to say Islam is good. Islam is good, we know that.
Sure.
And we don't want to say Islam is good because of the environment.
Sure.
We know Islam is good, and he doesn't need me, need you, and need all of us to say that Islam is good.
It's a bit more than that,
this amana that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, how are we going to put it in practice? This is the question, really.
Sure. Fantastic, Professor. I'm going to hand it over to Sidi Fazlun, and then we're going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes or so, because obviously we've got more than an hour. So, Bismillah, Fazlun.
What can I tell people who are engaged in this conversation?
In particular, we have a lot of academics, we have a lot of activists and academics.
Yeah, I take quite a radical view in my book that came out last year. It's called Signs on the Earth. وَفِي الْأَرْضِ آيَاتٌ لِلْمُوقِنِينَ وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Signs on the Earth, Islam, Modernity, and the Climate Crisis. It's a radical take on the current political economy and how I integrate in Islam and the social milieu into it. So please, it's up for debate. And I devote a whole chapter 5 on Islam and the natural world. But the rest is political analysis and social analysis. Historically, I think people need to understand that we talk about the ulama. In my view, the ulama need help. What happened in history? And I experienced this myself, as I said earlier on. During colonial times, the only aspect of fiqh that was allowed by the colonial powers was Islamic family law. That's all. So what that happened was that the ulama who were very close to the governing communities in those times were relegated into a secondary role. So what happened was West-educated experts were then made part of the governing elite, and the ulama was sidelined. So what they did within the powers that were available to them, they concentrated on ibadat. That's all they did. They did their job in the milieu that they were pushed into. So what has emerged now is a totally different ballgame in which the Islamic ruling powers, no matter where they are, I make no distinction, every one of us are now part of the global modernist paradigm, which is which is growth, prosperity, and development, all based on a banking system which is entirely haram. You see, we are part of it. So what do? We buy arms from the West. We build skyscrapers. We build clock towers where they're not supposed to be. So what we are trying to do is compete with the West in order to say that we are Muslims or we are as modern as you are. In my perception, in my analysis, I think this is out of date. Because going down this,
if I'm hungry and I want
I'm not blaming anybody. I'm stating a fact. What I've just told you are facts. What everybody, every single nation state, including the 56 or 57 is Muslim nation state, whether they call themselves Islamic or not, are tied to the apron strings of modernity. They're all part of the Wall Street, World Bank, IMF banking system. There is no way out of it. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm saying that's where we are. So how do we get back? That's the thing. How do we get back? I think for a start, we need to educate ourselves about understanding where we really are and our helplessness in using these computer algorithm generated plastic cards, which is non-money anyway. How do we get back to that? First, we need to educate ourselves. Fiqh al-biya, ilmul khalq, understand Quran, understand what Allah means by Allah tadghaw fil mizan. Allah understand what Allah means by la yuhibbul musrifin. Go back to those sources. Go back to what the Rasul said about planting trees as a sadaqah. You plant a tree when if the world is going to end tomorrow. There are all these lessons. So, as Fachruddin himself will understand, and I've been working with him for nearly 20 years, we begin by educating the ulama about what? About what modernity means. They need to understand. I think Sheikh Khardawi understands what that is. What is modernity? Where are we? You see? And they need to understand that. And I don't think, with greatest, I'm sure there are ulama who understand this, and I'm speaking generally, of course, that the majority of the ulama do not understand it. And if you go to a Jummah, you get the khutbahs of the practice of the Rasul and all the other things, but nothing about the environment, nothing about modernity, about development. They don't understand it. So what I'm saying, we need to understand where we are first and what the kind of society we live in mean to us, and do we want to be part of it? Can we get out of it? You know, how do we get out of it? And then once having understood that is ilm al-khalq, go back to the ulama and ask these questions from them and begin to educate them in a very humble fashion. They are good people and they want to hold the deen together, and without them we'd be lost. What I'm saying to you now is begin to understand the complementarity of ibadat and muamalat. You see, the link between ibadat and muamalat is zakat. Zakat is the link. You see, where you begin to go out of yourselves and help other people. That is the beginning of muamalat and the link. So we need to develop that.
So basically, you're saying to help our religious institutions, help the
of course,
help the ulama, invest in the train.
It's happening in Indonesia. It's a good model to follow. You see,
so
and
do you adapt to modernity? Do you adapt to modernity? Work around modernity?
No. You don't adapt modernity. You don't adapt to modernity. You begin to think of a new paradigm. What I'm saying is modernity is collapsing. It's a house of cards, it's wobbling. So it's also good dawah in the sense that if you speak this language to non-Muslim people, and it is my experience, they resonate with it, they empathize with it, you see. So you're doing dawah without doing dawah. You know, if you look at what Allah says in Quran and look at the practice of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, looking at it in environmental terms, you see that it is all there. So we need to understand what that is. You see, you're not. Modernity will collapse anyway. It is collapsing. This is why the United Nations Development Agency sent this email in January. They are saying they are afraid of another financial collapse. You see, it's a house of cards. You know, they can see it. They can see it. And so we need to, if I could use the phrase, grab the bull by the horns, we need to begin to understand what it is that we are really about, what it is this society is really about, what it is that the ulama and the Islamic leaders are really about. Make the connections between them and modernity and Islam. Learn all that. And I'm saying, please, it's a bit embarrassing, but I have to say, have a look at my book, Signs of the Earth. It'll give you a start. You know, it's a radical perspective and all kinds of questions. And we're up for a dialogue. I'm sure my colleagues on the panel, Mawil and Fachruddin, are also as well. And there are lots of other people. The team that we put together Islamic Climate Declaration in Istanbul in 2015. You know, it is now a global document. So we need to do things like this and get the ulama involved in this work and get them to understand what is really going on. You see? And so it's
Brother Mizan, I want to mention some of the books you asked me about books.
Yes.
And
some final words on the books, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I just picked up from, the book from, my
Collection
behind me. There's a book which is written. It's called Islam and Ecology, and this is edited by Richard Fultz and Frederick M. Denny. Actually, he mentioned Fazlun and mentioned my books, and he kind of collected a lot of references which is relevant to the environment. It's again Islam and Ecology by Richard Fultz, and it's published a few years ago, but it's still really.
It's an academic book of
academic practitioners, because he collected most what people has written about Islam and environment, and he's a professor of Islamic studies in America. The other book that I actually would mention is the book that I just said to you about, which is Islamic Principle for the Conservation of the Environment. It was published in the year 1983. 1983, one of the earliest works on the environment. This one, it's published by King Abdulaziz University in Saudi Arabia, and actually I wrote it with other 3 or 4 professors, Professor Abu Bakr Baqadar, Abdul Latif al-Sabbar, and it is under the patronage of the International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Yeah, I got that book. Very good introduction.
Am I breaking my voice? Can you? And also, this was, again, the environmental protection in Islam by the World Conservation Union, IUCN.
IUCN, yeah.
And also the Journal of Beliefs and Values published one article on Islam and environment.
The literature's there. Those who are serious will, you can go and see and read there. And so essentially what we're trying to say to people, because we've only got about a minute or 2 left, please, participants, whether you're academics or you're intellectuals or thinkers or activists or just general Joe public, please purchase the books by Professor Mawil and Fazlun Khalid and some others. There's enough research there, and there needs to be more research and teaching to be done. That's the takeaway, what we're saying right now, as we close
This
out.
This is a very good topic for PhDs and masters.
Right.
Those brothers and sisters should think about it, and we are happy to help them developing such projects. I'm sure Ustaz Fazlun and myself and Professor Fachruddin are very delighted to do that if people are interested. I mean, so far I have supervised about 5 PhDs on the subject, and there is more room for it, really.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Mawil. Thank you so much, Professor. Final words, Professor Fachruddin, on the subject and your reflections and thoughts, and also on your work at the Pesantrans in Indonesia, and developing an Islamic theology.
It is right what Fazlun said, that we have to invest with the education, because we are very heavy on the matter of challenge and a problem for the future. So the burdens of the ulama right now is also so complicated. And as Fazlun said, we have to teach the ulama is one of the key. That's what I'm doing in Indonesia. We are not teaching actually the ulama, but we are engaged them. We're working together with them. So we need to learn together. And the reality is that the ayat that we have to learn is not only textual but actual. We have the ayat in kauniyah.
Yeah.
We have the ayat between the kauniyah and kauliyah. Professor Izzuddin should know that. And what the book that been sold by the Professor Izzuddin, I have been translated and edited that maybe
MashaAllah.
last 13 years
Mashallah,
ago.
mashallah.
13
That's
years
like,
ago.
You should
It
send me a
been
copy of the translation, brother.
it been translated some chapters and been separated and make an influence to universities, Islamic universities in Indonesia.
MashaAllah.
And they also begin to explore. They have a PhD student, and they have some works on the Islam and ecology right now.
right.
And surprisingly, maybe last couple of months, a lecturer come to me from the Islamic University. He said, I would like to have a new curriculum to fulfill this philosophy of an adab faculty with your curriculum of Islam and Islamic theology and environment, he said.
Fantastic.
And I create that, and I think it will be positive.
That's the way.
And not only that, not only that, this is for the bachelor actually.
Is there?
So this is good starting.
We're closing up very shortly. Is there a reason why in the Far East, in Indonesia, I mean, you're a lot more passionate than say, for example, us folks in the Indian subcontinent or in the MENA region? Why is it that you're taking a lead in that? Just very shortly before we close out. Is it? What are the reasons? Would you say?
I think it's their own ecology. You know,
Right.
they live surrounded by forests and ecosystems that are quite diverse. My experience in Indonesia is that, you know, they're very close to nature. You know, and surprisingly, so you makes you wonder why Pakistan and Bangladesh are not taking the same kind of, and even Malaysia close by, not taking the same kind of passion as the Indonesian ulama. As I said, they are the people who develop this idea on fiqh al-biyah. You know, I'm taking a cue from them. So as the fiqh al-biyah and the things that they're developing called ilmul khalq are two complementary resources that Muslims can use. And we have a training program. The Fachruddin will confirm. We have a training program which the Indonesians have adopted. So there is a way out. There is a way out. There is a way forward.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much, distinguished panelists. We're really honored and grateful that you've taken up more than an hour.
Thank you.
Really, it's coming up 1 o'clock, so we nearly 2 hours, 2 hours of your time. So thank you so much. Those, if you leave your email addresses, we can give you the email addresses of the respective panelists if you want.
Mine is very easy. Izzuddin at hotmail.com. IZZIDIEN at hotmail.com.
Fantastic. I'll get that shared out and share that to everyone, and also your respective websites and your books and
website, yeah.
And stuff. Inshallah, we'll hope to continue this series because I think this issue is not going to go away, and it's important that we develop it and some forthcoming sessions. So thank you so much, everybody. We make dua and take care and wish you Ramadan Kareem. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.